There is a moment in Helgen, before you know what you are, before anyone does, where a dragon lands on top of a watchtower and the stone breaks open like an eggshell, and people begin to die. You are still in chains. Take a slow breath. Find somewhere comfortable. There is no hurry. We have the whole night. That moment in Helgen is where this story finds you. Not at the beginning of the prophecy, not at its end, but right at its hinge. Right at the moment when something written into the world, 10,000 years before you were born, finally arrives at your door. You did not choose it. You did not earn it. You could not have refused it. And yet there it is. A word forming in your chest before your mind has any idea what it means. A sound older than the language it lives in, rising up to meet the fire coming down. The word is Dovahkiin, and something is hidden inside it that changes the entire story. Not tonight, not yet. We need to earn that. But hold on to it, because when we get there, it will not look like what you expect. What I want to do is take you through the deep bones of this prophecy, not the version that gets told in taverns, not the one that makes it sound simple and clean, but the actual architecture underneath. The weight of who the Dragonborn really is, where that power comes from, what it costs, and why one of the most important questions the law raises is one it deliberately refuses to answer. By the time we reach the end of this, something in the way you understand what it means to carry something you did not choose, and what it means to decide what to do with it, will be different. Long before there were Nords, before there were emperors, before there was a Skyrim to protect, there were dragons. Not as rare encounters, not as distant legends, as rulers. The world the Elder Scrolls series is built on, Tamriel, the continent, existed in its earliest recoverable era under what the law calls the dragon cult. Dragons were not just powerful in this period. They were worshipped as living gods. They demanded tribute, obedience, and priests. They had names that functioned as commands, and when they spoke, the world obeyed. That is not metaphor. That is mechanics. The language of dragons, called the Thu'um, or simply the voice, operates on the fundamental substance of reality. A dragon who says fire is not describing fire. They are becoming fire, briefly, at the molecular level of existence. The Nords of that era were not free people who lived alongside dragons. They were, in every meaningful sense, subjects, servants. The dragon's word was law precisely because it was physically capable of being enforced by the structure of the universe itself. And then, something changed. A handful of ancient Nord heroes. The lore names 3 who matter most to this story: Hakon One-Eye, Gurmleth Golden-Hilt, and Feldir the Old, found a way to learn the voice themselves. Not the way dragons use it, which is instinctive and total. But enough. Enough to fight back. Enough to make the war that would eventually unseat Alduin possible. That war is called the Dragon War. It was brutal, and it was long, and when it ended, it did not end cleanly. But before we talk about how it ended, there is something you need to understand about what was happening on the other side of the world at the same time, something that produced the Dragonborn themselves. Because the Nord heroes learning the voice is only half the story, the other half began on a different continent, with a different woman, in a completely different kind of war. And it is that half that created the prophecy. Her name was Alessia, and she was a slave. The Elder Scrolls lore refers to her as Saint Alessia, the Mother of Men, the first Empress of Cyrodiil. The Book of the Dragonborn, an in-game text found scattered across Skyrim, describes her story as the origin point of everything the word Dragonborn would come to mean to an empire. But before the sainthood, before the empire, there was just a woman leading a rebellion against elvish slave masters called the Aelids, fighting a war she had no rational reason to believe she could win. She won it. Or rather, she didn't win it alone. The lore tells us that Akatosh, the dragon god of time, the chief of the divine beings the Elder Scrolls calls the Divines, looked down on Alessia's war with pity. And on her deathbed, he drew blood from his own heart and blessed her with it. He made a covenant. So long as Alessia's lineage remained true to the dragon blood, Akatosh would endeavor to seal the barriers between the mortal world and the realm of oblivion, the Daedric Plains, and keep the armies of demonic forces from crossing over. Those blessed by Akatosh with this gift became known simply as Dragonborn. Here is where the reframe lives. For most of the history that follows Alessia, the title Dragonborn is synonymous with political legitimacy. The Dragonborn emperors, the line of Septim, the ability to wear the Amulet of Kings, the people who could light the dragon fires in the Temple of the One and hold back oblivion itself. For centuries, most citizens of the empire understood Dragonborn to mean approximately rightful ruler, blessed by God, legitimately in charge. That is not what it actually means. What it actually means, what it was always at its root pointing toward, is something the Book of the Dragonborn describes in careful, slightly nervous language. The text says plainly that being Dragonborn is not a simple matter of heredity, that it is beyond our understanding exactly how and why it is bestowed. That is a scholar admitting, in writing preserved across thousands of years, that the mechanism of the Dragonborn's existence is a divine mystery that even Akatosh's own priests cannot fully explain. The covenant was not made to produce warriors. It was made to seal a door. The warriors came later, and the first one was not who anyone would have predicted. His name, in dragon language, means allegiance guide, Mirak. He existed in the Merethic era, the period before recorded history, before the Dragon War had concluded, when dragons still ruled and their human servants still obeyed. He was a dragon priest on the island of Solstheim, which is to say, he was one of the humans who served the dragons most faithfully, who enforced their will among other mortals, who was trusted enough to be given real power in exchange for real devotion. But Mirak was Dragonborn, and the lore is careful to note that this predates the terminology. The word Dragonborn, as a formal title, comes after Alessia. Mirak's nature has no name yet in his own era. What it means in practice is that he could absorb the souls of slain dragons, learning their power instantly, without the years of practice other mortals would require. He could wield the Thuum Thitsar, way dragons do, not painstakingly, word by word, but from something deeper, something inherited. He used that power to betray his masters. The details are fragmented, as they would be for something this old. What the lore confirms is that Mirak eventually acquired forbidden knowledge from Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric prince of fate, memory, and hidden information, who exists in a realm called Apocrypha, which is essentially an infinite black library of everything that was ever written and everything anyone ever wanted to keep secret. Through Mora, Mirak learned the shout called Bend Will, which could force obedience from humans and dragons alike. He turned on his dragon overlords. He killed a great many of them. He failed, not because he lacked power. He lacked allies, or lacked the wisdom to keep them. A loyal dragon priest named Vahlok defeated him in battle on Solstheim, and just as Mirak was about to be killed, Hermaeus Mora intervened, transported him to Apocrypha, saved his life, and in doing so, trapped him in the realm of forbidden knowledge for thousands upon thousands of years. The dragons burned Mirak's temple to the ground. His name was erased from most records. The Skarl people of Solstheim preserved a memory of him in their legends, where he is called simply the traitor. Hold on to that word. Hold on to the name that means allegiance guide. Because thousands of years later, when the last Dragonborn encounters Mirak in Apocrypha and finally ends his Ulstamassans' long captivity, they absorb his soul, making them the only living being to carry inside them the power and the memory of the very first Dragonborn who ever existed. The first and the last, briefly sharing the same body. The game never makes a proclamation of this. It is just there, if you are paying attention. This is the part that tends to get overlooked in conversations about why the Dragonborn is special. Every Nord in Skyrim knows the legends of the Thu'um. The voice is part of Nordic culture. The ancient heroes who could shout back the tide, the stories of battle magic used to reshape the weather and crack stone and drop armies. The Greybeards, who live at High Hrothgar on the throat of the world, have devoted their lives to its study. Their order was founded by a man named Jurgen Windcaller after a catastrophic battle in which Nordic warriors used the Thu'um so aggressively that it was considered a desecration. And Windcaller, survivor of that defeat, concluded that the voice should be turned inward toward contemplation, not outward toward violence. His philosophy is called the Way of the Voice. His followers have spent centuries in near total silence, speaking only in shouts so controlled they barely disturb the air. A normal person, even a talented one, even a Nord with heritage and training and decades of dedicated study, can learn words of power. They can learn individual words of the Thu'um, practice them, incorporate them. It takes years to learn a single word, decades to master a full shout. The Greybeards themselves, among the most accomplished practitioners alive, have spent lifetimes reaching their level of mastery. The Dragonborn learns a shout the moment they absorb a dragon's soul. Not hours, not days. Immediately. The knowledge appears, complete the way remembering something you already knew appears, not learned, but recovered. This is the lore's most precise explanation of what distinguishes a Dragonborn from any other being. They do not learn the voice. They remember it, because the soul of a dragon already knows it. Ulfric Stormcloak, who is himself a capable practitioner of the Thu'um through long years of Greybeard training, says it directly when he meets the last Dragonborn. The Dragonborn can shout the way dragons do, without training, through inborn instinct. There is a detail sitting at the center of this that the lore does not state outright, but that the surrounding context makes almost impossible to avoid. Hold on to it for a little while longer. We are almost to the place where it changes everything. Skyhaven Temple is a ruin carved into the Karth Spire in Skyrim's Reach region, accessible in the game through a quest that requires a blood seal, a door that will only open for someone of true dragon blood. Inside is a chamber that has been sealed for centuries, preserved almost perfectly. On one wall is a mural. It is called Alduin's Wall, and it was constructed over the course of 6 years, beginning around the year 2812 of the First Era, commissioned by Emperor Raymond II, built by craftsmen from temples across the empire, overseen by the Grand Master of the Dragon Guard, the organization that would eventually become the Blades. Its purpose, as the lore records it, was to preserve everything the Dragon Guard had learned about Alduin and the prophecy that surrounded him, as a gift to the generations that came after. Because they understood something crucial. Alduin's return was not a possibility. It was an inevitability. The question was never whether, only when and whether anyone would be ready. The mural tells the story in 2 halves, The first half depicts the Dragon War and Alduin's banishment. The second half depicts the 5 historical omens that will precede his return. Events the Akaviri dragon slayers who compiled this knowledge believed were already set in stone, already written, just waiting to unfold. The prophecy ends with one line: "The World Eater wakes, and the wheel turns upon the last Dragonborn." But the first half is where the detail that most people miss is recorded. The ancient Nords did not kill Alduin during the Dragon War. They tried. The lore preserves a scene from the summit of the throat of the world. Hakon One Eye and Gurmleth Golden Hilt and Feldir the Old facing Alduin directly, using the Thuum against him and failing. The Dragonrend shout they had forged, a weapon designed specifically to force an immortal mind to comprehend mortality, to drag a being that exists outside of time into the experience of being trapped within it, could cripple Alduin, but could not kill him. Nothing they had could kill him. Feldir the Old had brought an Elder Scroll. The Elder Scrolls are not books. They are fragments of the fabric of time itself. Objects that exist partially outside of causality, that can reveal possible futures and past events to those willing to pay the price of reading them, which is usually blindness or madness, or both. Feldir used the scroll to perform an incantation that did not kill Alduin, but instead cast him forward through time, ejected him from that specific moment in history into an unknown point in the future, where the prophecy would find him and the Dragonborn would be waiting. And where Feldir performed that incantation, at the very peak of the throat of the world, the lore calls what remained a time wound, a scar inter, the fabric of time, a place where the present moment has a hole in it that opens backward onto that ancient battle. The last Dragonborn will eventually stand on that exact spot with their own Elder Scroll and peer through the time wound to witness the battle that sent Alduin forward, and in doing so, learn the lost shout called Dragonrend that Hakon and Gurmla and Feldir used against him. The wound in time and the weapon to defeat him are the same thing. The scar and the cure are the same scar. That is the architecture this world runs on. There is a scholarly tradition within the Elder Scrolls world of debating whether Alduin and Akatosh are the same being. An in-game text called the Alduin/Akatosh dichotomy records the journey of a high priest named Alexandra Simon, who traveled across Tamriel interviewing Nords, Imperials, and scholars, trying to resolve this question. The Nords insist they are different beings, that Akatosh is good and Alduin is not, that they serve different functions, that treating them as the same god is a category error that the Imperials have never properly understood. The Imperial scholarly tradition insists they are the same, that Alduin is simply Akatosh as understood through the lens of a culture that feared him, his story twisted through centuries of oral tradition until the good was stripped away. The game does not resolve this, deliberately. It is designed to remain open. But the UESP's lore documentation, drawing on in-world sources, records something that lands differently if you have been holding the thread I asked you to hold. Some sources within the Elder Scrolls world maintain that the Dragonborn are not merely blessed by Akatosh, they are fragments of Akatosh's soul. As are all dragons. As, potentially, is Alduin himself. Sit with that for a moment. Alduin calls himself the firstborn of Akatosh. The last Dragonborn, according to these sources, is made of the same divine substance. The soul inside the person who just escaped execution in Helgen, the soul that makes the voice feel like remembering instead of learning, that makes dragon power available the way a native language is available, that soul is not a reward Akatosh gave to a mortal. It is a piece of himself, placed inside a mortal body, which means the Dragonborn and the World Eater are not opposites. They are kin. Everything you have learned about why the Dragonborn can do what they do, the instant comprehension, the instinctive mastery, the way the voice arrives whole rather than piece by piece, all of it points here. Not to a blessing conferred from outside, but to a nature that was always already present. Not a human given a dragon's power, a fragment of a divine being, living a mortal life, carrying inside them something so old and so large that the universe arranged thousands of years of history specifically to make sure it was present at the right moment. 2 quiet breaths. Let that settle. Because this is also the thing that makes Miraak make sense in a completely different way. Miraak spent thousands of years in Apocrypha, not as a prisoner in any simple sense. He had access to Hermaeus Mora's infinite library. He had time, more time than any mortal has ever had to think and plan and refine. He had power that grew, slowly, across those millennia, fed by the dark knowledge Mora fed him and the fragments of soul he managed to accumulate. By the time 4E201 arrives, the year Skyrim takes place, Miraak has been trapped in Apocrypha for roughly 3,000 to 4,000 years. And he is not broken. He is furious. His plan, when the last Dragonborn first encounters him, is elegant in its ambition. He has been using his bend will shout to reach through the barrier between Apocrypha and Tamriel, burrowing into the dreams of the Skarl people and the other inhabitants of Solstheim, making them unknowingly labor while they sleep, rebuilding his ancient temple, constructing channels around the island's sacred stones of power, creating a mechanism by which he can finally return to the physical world. The people of Solstheim wake each morning exhausted, unable to explain what happened, some of them quietly chanting words they do not understand and cannot stop. His name means Allegiance Guide. He has spent 4,000 years in the dark, and he is still trying to lead others toward a destination. The tragedy of Miraak is not that he was evil. The lore lets him be complicated. He was arrogant, yes. His first meeting with the last Dragonborn, who encounters him briefly in Apocrypha before being expelled, consists largely of Miraak dismissing them as inferior, telling them they have no idea of the true power a Dragonborn can wield. There is something almost unbearable in that line, if you hold it in both hands. A being who has spent 4,000 years in darkness, who has turned into something monstrous in the process of surviving, whose entire existence has been shaped by the conviction that he was the most powerful thing of his kind that ever lived, meeting, for the first time, the person the world chose after him. The first Dragonborn, meeting the last Dragonborn. When Hermaeus Mora kills Miraak, impaling him as he tries to flee, announcing to the last Dragonborn that he has found a better servant, Miraak's final words are a curse. He hopes the Dragonborn will be rewarded for their service the way he was. He dies bitter and aware, and not entirely wrong. And then his soul passes into the last Dragonborn. The first and the last, briefly the same person. The game does not mark this with ceremony. There is no cutscene that honors what just happened. It is just a soul absorbed, the way all the others were. The score plays, the screen fades. You are left carrying something that has waited 4,000 years to be free, and is now, finally, part of the last story it will ever inhabit. There is one more person in this story who does not get enough room. His name is Paarthurnax. His name in dragon language means ambition, overlord, cruelty. He chose that name, or was given it, during the era when he served as Alduin's right hand. His position before the Dragon War was approximately what we would call a lieutenant, the second most powerful dragon in the hierarchy, Alduin's enforcer, the one who carried out the World Eater's most difficult orders. He betrayed Alduin to teach humanity how to fight back. The lore does not fully explain what changed in Paarthurnax, because Paarthurnax himself is careful to speak about this with precision. He does not claim he became good. He claims he chose a different path, knowing he was capable of the path he left behind. He says, in dialogue to the last Dragonborn, on the summit of the throat of the world, where he has lived in penance for thousands of years, that he still feels the pull of his nature. The cruelty in his name is not metaphor. He chose to sit on a mountain and meditate, because sitting on a mountain and meditating was the only reliable way he knew to not become the thing he used to be. There is something in that worth keeping, a being who understands the worst version of themselves clearly enough to structure an entire life around making sure it does not win. The Greybeards revere him. Paarthurnax was the one who initially taught the ancient Nord rebels the Thuum, who translated the knowledge of the voice from a draconic instinct into something a mortal body could learn and use. Without him, there is no Dragonrend. Without Dragonrend, there is no weapon against Alduin. Without that weapon, the last Dragonborn arrives at the throat of the world with nothing. He has been sitting on that mountain, in wind and cold, for the entire span of recorded history, waiting to be useful again, waiting for the one the prophecy named. And the question the game poses about Paarthurnax, which it hands to the player and refuses to take back, is whether the good he has done since cancels the evil he did before. The Blades want him killed for his crimes. The Greybeards would be devastated. Paarthurnax himself, in what might be the most honest piece of dialogue in the game, says only that he can offer no argument in his own defense, that what he did was real, and that the decision belongs to the Dragonborn. The game gives you the choice. It does not give you the answer. The prophecy on Alduin's wall ends with the last Dragonborn. It does not specify where they will face the World Eater. What the lore confirms, and what the game depicts, is that the final confrontation between the last Dragonborn and Alduin does not happen in Tamriel. It happens in Sovngarde. Sovngarde is the Nordic afterlife. The Hall of Valor, presided over by the dead god Tsun, is where the spirits of worthy Nords go when they die, warriors and heroes who lived and fought and fell in glory. It is described as a vast, beautiful golden land, and in the normal course of things, it is a place of rest, a place where the old heroes feast and remember, a place that should be, by its nature, beyond the reach of the living world's problems. Alduin has been feeding there. This is the detail that changes the texture of the entire story. Alduin did not return to Skyrim merely to raise an army of dragons and conquer the living. He returned to eat the dead. The souls in Sovngarde, trapped in Alduin's mist, consumed to add to his power. The World Eater is doing exactly what his name describes, and he is doing it in the one place his victims were supposed to be safe. The last Dragonborn cannot simply defeat Alduin in the physical world. Even the Dragonrend shout, which can wound him, can force him to land, can deny him flight, cannot kill him in Mundus, the mortal plane. His nature is too fundamental, too tied to the fabric of time itself. To truly end him, the last Dragonborn must follow him to Sovngarde, must walk through the realm of the dead as a living person, must fight Alduin on ground where the heroes he has been devouring can stand alongside them, where Hakon One-Eye and Gurmleth Goldenhilt and Feldir the Old, three of the ancient warriors who first faced Alduin at the throat of the world thousands of years ago, can finally fight the battle they could only delay when they were alive, the living and the dead together. The ancient past and the present moment finally occupying the same place. When Alduin is defeated in Sovngarde, something happens that the lore notes carefully. He is not absorbed. The last Dragonborn absorbs the souls of every other dragon they defeat. That is the mechanism. The dragon's immortality severed, the soul claimed. But Alduin's soul, when he falls, disperses. The game confirms this. Tsun, the guardian of the Whalebone Bridge, says that Alduin's doom is not yours to decide, that his fate rests with the gods. The last Dragonborn can defeat the World Eater. They cannot unmake him. Some things are bigger than the hero. If you stand on the throat of the world after everything is finished, after Helgen and the Greybeards and Skyhaven Temple and Sovngarde and all the rest, the mountain is quiet. You are still the same person who was kneeling in ash and smoke at the beginning. You still have no certain answer to the question of what you are. Fragment of a god, accident of fate, the answer to a prophecy no one fully understood, or something the lore keeps deliberately open because that openness is the point. What you carry is the same thing you carried at Helgen. The fire, the voice that is not learned but remembered. The dragon's soul in a mortal body, which means the capacity for enormous destruction and the capacity to choose not to use it held together in the same chest, inseparable. That is what the prophecy was pointing at all along. Not a warrior with a special power, not a chosen one with a clean destiny and a clean ending. Something older and stranger, a piece of the same divine substance that made the World Eater, placed into a mortal who could grow tired and grieve and doubt and still walk into Sovngarde anyway. The difference between the first Dragonborn and the last is not ability. Miraak had power the last Dragonborn spent the entire game building toward. The difference is what each of them chose to do when the moment came, and who they chose to carry with them into it, and who they chose to let go. If you know someone who has spent a long time carrying something enormous, some capacity or some wound that came to them without their permission, and that they have been deciding what to do with ever since, there is something in this story that belongs to them. If you are that person, this story was always about you. If this is your first time here, the like button and subscribe mean the world. They are how this channel reaches people who might need it. The summit is cold and still. The dragons that remain are quiet or scattered, or sitting on mountains of their own in their own private penances. The sky over Skyrim is enormous and dark and full of old light. You have the voice. You do not have to use it. The fire that once ate worlds is inside you, and tonight it is simply warm. Let the night take you.